It's 6:51, Michael Cohen, 1320 WILS on a Friday, heading into the weekend. So we've had our next guest on several times because this is an issue that affects every single one of you because you're all addicts, and you're addicts of sugar. Dr. Gerald Edelman is the author of the book Sugar Rehab, Staying Fit and Young by Overcoming Your Secret Sugar Addiction to Sugar. Find his website, sugarrehabbook.com, sugarrehabbook.com. Dr. Edelman, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure again, Michael.
Yeah.
How are you tonight?
Very good. Now, you are an oncologist. You are a doctor treating patients with cancer. Well, you know, we've talked about this in several angles, but the one thing about sugar, right, there are different kinds. Well, let me revert this. Before we go into that, last time we talked, you told me you had a 6% body fat. Is that right?
Yes.
So what I wanted to ask is that we didn't have time last time. How have you maintained such a slim physique and such low body fat?
Well, I've essentially put that in my book. I literally live what I've said in my book.
Okay. Were you much heavier at some point?
Yes, I actually, I wasn't really obese, but I was running more and more and more. I used to run about 6 to 8 miles a day. Of course, I ate, a lot of sugar like we all do in the United States, and I started to gain that midsection, that we all get, the middle-aged kind of thing, and I was tired all the time. So I started to eat a low-sugar, high-protein, higher-fat diet. And I changed from doing a lot of aerobic exercise to weightlifting. And that's kind of what I advocate in the book.
Do you still run now?
No, I actually don't. I lift weights probably about 4 times a week. And when I do that, I'm constantly moving from station to station. So I'm sure I get my heart rate up. But I think you get more bang for your buck by doing resistance training than you do aerobics. And I
know the focus of your book is the food, the sugar, but how important is the weightlifting, would you say? Can you be healthy without it?
Man, you're asking great questions. It's 80% diet, which is the first part of the book, and it's about 25% the resistance training that I'm talking about, which I also touch upon on the book. And but the problem with aerobic exercise is you really don't burn enough calories in the time that people have to do it to really make a big impact unless you dramatically change your diet. And if you're doing aerobic exercise, your body craves more sugar and carbohydrate. So it's kind of a lose-lose for most people.
Gotcha. You get home from running, you're starving. Next thing you know, you're wolfing food down. So I'm talking to Dr. Gerald Edelman, author of the book Sugar Rehab, sugarrehabbook.com. Now, sugar, we've got glucose. We know that. That's, the stuff that's in your blood. You eat some bread, it all turns into glucose, all those starches. But this high fructose corn syrup, is just about in everything. Now, is there a difference between the glucose and this high fructose corn syrup?
The body reads fructose just like it reads glucose. What I'm trying to do is help people simplify the way they think. It almost sounds kind of counterintuitive because we think as human beings that we have to think complexly in order to be intelligent. So we associate intelligence with complex thought. What we forget is that our bodies are intelligent entities. We know what to eat. We sometimes just overthink it. So what I do with sugar is I lump it all together. I say
the whole bag, because there are differences, right? Metabolic differences between fructose and glucose, how it's handled.
There are, if you're studying for biochemistry tests and you want to pass exams.
Okay.
But if you want to have a practical guide that works in our modern society, you just lump them together.
Okay, essentially avoid or minimize both. So let me move on to what I want to ask you about insulin, and I want to ask you about cancer and insulin, because we know insulin is the response. It's a hormone. You eat sugar, insulin comes out, it's in the blood, it needs to get out there to help you deal with the sugar. Is there a link between having high insulin, which many of us have throughout the day, and cancer, which you are an expert at?
Yes. So on the surface of cells, all cells, cancer and normal, there is a protein called an insulin growth receptor protein. So insulin is a growth stimulus. And there are a major area of cancer research are to now create drugs that are insulin growth receptor inhibitors. It's one area of cancer research. There are studies that have actually linked high blood sugar levels with higher recurrence rates of various types of cancer.
So wait, are you saying the insulin itself, having high insulin in the blood, will help a cancer grow?
I am saying that there is data that suggests that, and I'd like people to think in those terms to help them follow the guidelines I'm suggesting in the book. So insulin is one villain because it is a growth factor, and it has been associated with recurrence of cancer and also growth of cancer. So keeping your blood sugar levels nice and even and not getting spikes in it is a good thing with regard to cancer. Also, there's a very strong correlation between obesity and development of cancer. So obese people are more likely to develop, if the female, breast cancer, cancer of the uterus. About 40% of kidney cancer patients are obese.
No,
so there's a very strong...
Is there a link between the high levels of sugar and insulin also to obesity itself?
Yes. That's what I'm really claiming. What I'm claiming is if you simplify your thought process and you say, you know what, I'm going to pay attention to the sugars per serving and follow the list Dr. Edelman says in his book and stick to that, what is going to happen is if you're already obese, you're going to lose weight. If you are tending towards obesity, you're going to prevent becoming obese, and that will decrease the incidence of cancer at a population.
Let me ask you this. So when you reduce your sugar, did you then increase things like protein and fat in your diet?
Yes, actually on the lists of okay, in my book it's separated into okay lists and not okay lists. What you'll find is there's a lot of protein and a lot of natural good sources of fat on the okay lists. On the not okay list, basically you're eliminating sugar.
And you're saying, so you're essentially going to begin losing weight simply by eating less glucose, less sugar, less white breads and so on, and eating more of this protein and healthy fat?
Yeah. I'm saying your body views white bread as sugar. So I'd like people to start thinking in terms of sugar versus not sugar. Because if we start thinking in terms of carbohydrates and things, it's very hard for us to get a mental image of what a carbohydrate is unless we're a biochemist. It's pretty easy to sense intuitively what sugar is. So white bread is no different than sugar to the body.
It just turns into glucose there. Your premise is nothing with over 2 grams of sugar per serving, correct?
Yes, it's a guide that works, especially if you're overweight and trying not to be. I've had folks follow my book, and they have lost 10 to 15, even 20 pounds in 6 to 8 weeks.
And what about their health? Beyond the weight, what is happening with their health when they do this?
So the results in clinical trials that have looked at low sugar and higher fat, higher protein diets and compared it to higher sugar, higher carbohydrate, low protein, low fat, have shown consistently that there's improvement in all cardiovascular risk parameters, like cholesterol levels go down, blood pressure goes down. It's all good.
Really, because the focus has been, especially with cardiovascular issues, has been on fat specifically. How much is it really the sugar that's causing us so many problems there?
I think it's 95% plus sugar. I think it's a mistaken notion that natural sources of fat, like butter, for example, are bad for you. I think it's just a wrong understanding, a misconception. You know, what we're thinking is that if we eat something fat, we're going to be fat. But actually, when you eat something that's high in natural sources of fat, like butter, you're not going to eat a heck of a lot of it because it's so rich and you're not going to overeat.
Mm-hmm. The doctors you work with, the doctors you talk to, how do they respond when you tell them this?
Well, that's a really good question. So my colleagues are very, very excited about the book. Many of them advocate it to their patients. And I'll tell you, as a nation, if you're paying attention, what I'm talking about, the evils of sugar, is just the hottest topic right now amongst the medical community because it's true.
How about the federal guidelines for eating? Aren't they still insisting we eat a lot of grains and things of that type?
Yes, and I may say something controversial as a medical doctor, and also I have a Ph.D. and you know, I've studied a lot. This is controversial, but I don't believe you have to follow guidelines and count, you know, every little thing you do. If you follow the lists in my book and you're strict with it, your body will naturally eat what it wants to eat, and it won't overeat. That's the most important thing.
You can find out a lot more. The book is called Sugar Rehab. Sugar Rehab, Staying Fit and Young by Overcoming Your Secret Addiction to Sugar. The website where you can find a lot more information, also sugarrehabbook.com, sugarrehabbook.com. So you believe we can stay younger then by not eating sugar also?
Yes. You know, the insulin that you've been talking about, when your blood sugar goes up and insulin goes up as a response in your bloodstream, it causes an inflammatory state. And inflammation, with all the things that cause inflammation chemically, is part of the aging process. So absolutely, yes.
It's Dr. Gerald Edelman. Again, sugarrehabbook.com. Dr. Edelman, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Michael, thank you for having me on. I'd love to come on again.
We will talk again, certainly.